Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian Farmer at Start Trade Group, and this is your end of day as well as end of recap for Friday, the 14th of July. And just like that, we are through halfway through the month of July. Kind of a weird start to the month because in terms of like day count, we started the 1st of July. So the first trading day of July was actually came up to be the 3rd of the month. Then, of course, we had the 4th of July off for vacation. So really, today's the 14th, and we've only had about like a week and a half of trading. So, kind of weird how that happened, but it is what it is. We're through we're through half the month. This is a seasonally strong month of the year, and we've got a couple more weeks to go. So before we get into any of the recaps, risk disclaimer in front of you: everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Please read the full risk disclaimer right there, as I'm just highlighting a couple things here, because I'm gonna go through in this video basically observations, about 5 or 6 observations or takeaways from this week. A couple of them, I would say coming from today too. So first of all, if you look at the performance for the day, it does feel like the indices, had such a big move for the week. And I think it's really important to put that in perspective is, really, really strong performance this week. But at some point, there's going to be some profit taking, some digestion, a little bit of reversals, especially when you kind of look at what the next couple of weeks are going to be more focused on. Earnings, right? And a lot of names have really run into their report. They've had a pretty good month, quarter, year, in terms of performance that we've seen. So I think what's going to be interesting is how companies report, what they say about their guidance. And really what's kind of interesting for me, and how I kind of use this in my trading analysis is, we're going to find I don't want to say new market leadership, but you're going to find single stocks that could be the new leaders for the next quarter, right? Names that may surprise, and institutions, they will have to buy some of these names that had good results. Now, we're not going to get every company that has had good results, but you are going to probably see some this is just my little prediction, which is not a major prediction, but it's usually what happens during earnings season is some names are going to beat earnings. Some names are going to beat and then maybe talk about the future, and it's not going to be so great. Some names are going to miss, right? So there's going to be some underperformers and there's going to be some outperformers is what I'm trying to say here. And I think those names that are excelling in their business could really set up for good trading opportunities. So you kind of have to be patient with that. Every quarter we do put together an earnings like watch list, and earnings strength or gap list is basically what I call it. And those could really end up being some really good opportunities to kind of come out of that. And so we'll get more into that into earnings season, but it's really a good time to be making some observations. We of course will trade a couple earnings reports too, but really what I like to basically do is look for easy trades, look for names that possibly might run it into the earnings report and take them off, before the actual report, because the report is an unknown. Play some names that have really good earnings history, right? There's something to that. We talked about that in our midday video today. And then of course, position for some names that are going to do really well. Like, so for example, a couple of reports for today, we might as well start there for the day. UNH, this was a really ugly looking candle, and a possible breakdown coming, but you're going to see things like this. Right, the stock was up 7% today and really gave a lift to healthcare stocks. Now, how does the overall group look? Well, we've got a nice easy level to watch here for the XLV healthcare ETF. That's going to be 132. So I didn't do anything in this space today because I want to see some confirmation that maybe we're going to see something out of this group other than just basically sideways type price action. So that's, and again, these are the observations and takeaways that we're going to be looking for is, hey, maybe it's going to be this group that's going to show leadership, or maybe it's that group, but not yet. Nice day for XLV. It did outperform with the help of UNH, giving a lift to a decent amount of healthcare names today. So that will be on watch. Also, AEHR, right? This is a very small cap semiconductor, but notice what this did. Really nice movement, up all the way up to $49 today. So that's a strong move. And look at the volume on that move too. So I know this is a name that more uh, you know uh, traders like to see small cap growth like this, and there you go. Pretty impressive price action. Let's get a little bit more into some of the observations for the week. One of which I want to talk about is Bitcoin. Right? You don't always we talk about Bitcoin very first in this videos, but hey, I'm watching. I'm ready for this leg higher in Bitcoin, but not yet. I mean, we had a really nice push higher yesterday in Bitcoin, but no follow through. And this is basically what this has been doing now for about a month, really. This is going back to 623, so not quite a month, but maybe 3 weeks at this point. And so if you feel like you've missed something in Bitcoin, now there's been some really impressive performance in blockchain and crypto names, but in terms of Bitcoin itself, right, this has not really started to break higher yet, and it may. And I think here's where, as a trader, the P word comes into play. Patience. You've got to have patience, right, for things that, if you're waiting for a breakout and so forth, because really what could transpire here is possibly a move up to 39,700. Also, before we get there, maybe 36,000, right? That could be a play, but I would say I'm going to wait until this, until this breaks out. I don't really care if I miss that first like green candle. That's the confirmation of a break higher. So I think that's very interesting. And I mentioned the blockchain stocks, and we've talked about these this week, but the MicroStrategy, CoinDesk, right? That's going to be something to kind of watch and see if it kind of backs and fills a little bit. The stock was green, then closed red today. As I mentioned, a lot of reversals today. Again, I think that's quite normal. I know some traders get disappointed when they see reversals, but you've got to have a bigger perspective than just the day, because even something like this, Coinbase has been on a huge run. Let it come in, let it back and fill, right? And let some sellers kind of do their thing and take profits, and then we could possibly see another move up. And I think if now we could talk a little bit about the S&P chart, but this has been very methodical, and I hope it stays methodical like this. But here's a break higher, retest of the 20-day moving average, break higher, retest of the 20-day moving average, and this week was a nice swing back up. So at some point we could either extend maybe up into this VPOC up here at 45.97, or if we come back, we could look for another retest, and that would be an area to kind of load up on risk, right? And rinse and repeat. And that's how it's been going over the last month or so. So I think that's a pretty good looking situation that we have on our hands. Also note just a couple of things here is that I always, one of the reasons why I have the 5-period moving average on my charts, well, maybe 2 reasons, is number one, it tells me if there's a short-term trend going on, and if price is honoring that, and it is, but it kind of helps you be a little bit grounded here, because prices got a little bit extended above this 5-period moving average, and it's also decently above the 20. So again, that's a strong market. That's not a negative thing, but you got to let it kind of cool a little bit without getting caught in trades. So again, my opinion, I'm sharing that with you. So that's where the S&P is kind of locked in between the July value area, top of value, as well as the version point of control. Now, a couple of the other indices look a little bit different. We've talked about this a couple of times this week, that we took out this upside VPOC, and this was going to be an area of possible digestion. And the small caps really underperformed a little bit today. So again, overhead supply coming into the picture. That was a great place to, if you were playing long the small caps or even in individual names, knowing that you had an area of overhead supply, virgin point of control. That's the name that we call them on our indicator, right from this volume profile. This comes into play over and over, and there you go. And there's some digestion. Now, so what I would watch is, just like with any particular reversal candle or ugly looking, bar or candle on a chart, watch to see if the short-term trend is lost. For now, again, it's that situation where price really got extended. And, I think this basically filled the gap here. So now we'll see if after this day, if price can stay above its 5-period moving average. And if not, if it breaks this, then the next decision area will be this 188.15 to see if buyers will come in at the retest. I mean, that might be a little bit more attractive. At the very least, let's see if the 5-day moving average can hold up. Now, the Qs, and I think we touched upon this in yesterday's video, but we took out a virgin point of control 2 there. So again, it's a logical place for some digestion, some overhead supply coming into the picture. And again, we've got a lot of earnings reports coming up next week too. So perhaps, investors want to now see what these results are going to be, to see if that can kind of carry through to a next leg higher. But again, there's nothing wrong with, at this point, seeing some backing and filling after a really big, nice week of performance. All right, and that will kind of get me over to we talked about healthcare. We talked about Bitcoin. We've talked about the indices hit basically a decent speed bump with overhead supply. Let's talk about the week in review for a minute. So I mentioned a really strong week. Well, how strong was it? The S&P was up 2.4%. The diamonds were helped by UNH today. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was helped by the UNH results today. Small caps still, even with down 1% today, we're still up 3.7% for the week. The Qs right there as well, with strong performance up 3.5% for the week. And emerging markets, international and international developed markets, both very strong. EEM was up 4.1% over the last 5 days. EFA very strong too. And here we can kind of talk a little bit about macro stuff too, right? Last week was a big kind of worry, at least for me, maybe not for you, but for me, was the fact that yields were going higher. Now, this week, TLT was up, yields came in, and we are at a decision area, or a pivot, if you want to call it that. This is the 30-year bond futures, right, which is /ZB on your Thinkorswim chart, or whatever other chart system you're using. But now, so we had this breakdown. We don't know if this is going to be if this was a false breakdown, right? But we are into some resistance here, and that's the bottom of the value area for the month of July. So 126.24. If now TLT is different, as a different maturity, but you could look at this as well. But same concept here. We rallied from the lows here right into some resistance. So 101.42. So the question is, again, and we don't have the answer to that. And sometimes I know traders want to know right away, what's the answer to this? I don't have the answer for you, but I think this 101.42 level is a really important level to watch in TLT, because the bond market does sometimes dictate, when it moves quickly, what's going on in equities, right? Again, I'll say that again. When the bond market really moves quickly and volatility picks up, that volatility often spills over to equities, right? Because bonds are important, right? So this was, again, a nice, really nice bounce for bonds this week. And we'll have to see how that works going into next week. And then the other big macro story was what the dollar did this week, right? The dollar really moved lower. UUP is going to look a little bit different than dollar futures, but that's a big breakdown in the dollar. And that's usually a pretty decent positive for equities. So I think I talked about this in yesterday's video, but when, mainly predominantly what I do is follow the price action, right? Price is the most important thing to me. However, I do look at some of the under the hood indicators and kind of go from there. And I look for divergences or converging factors, right? And what I'm seeing is, what the dollar is doing is basically that is a confirming indicator to say that risk on in equities makes sense when you've got the dollar breaking down like that. All right. So that's another takeaway from this week that I think is important. And I think, next we'll go over the performance of not just the indices here, but what excelled this week. Even with, Bitcoin coming in, blockchain stocks were still very strong for the week. Also, gold was right up there too. Home builders turned in a huge week, right? I started to get really, again, I get worried about groups. If I see the facts change, look at what the home builders did this week. After a bearish engulfing candle, and this is why I always say it's important, even if it can't, as I think I already said in this video, if you get a really nasty looking candle, right, or a reversal day, if you didn't lose the trend, all is not lost. And here's a good example of it. Horrible looking candle last week in the home builders. Again, bearish engulfing, but notice that the short-term trend was not lost, and the ITB closed on its highs. Unbelievable performance that's been taking place, and Raymond James helped today. They upgraded a couple of the home builders, but that's, to me, one of the takeaways this week is just really, really important candle that happened this week in the home builders. And then, of course, Chinese internet names were strong this week. That's something different. But even with the energy stocks were down today, but they've had a really nice couple of weeks. Oil services still finished up 4%. Again, lots of groups that were up over 3 weeks. And you could see some of the underperformers. Telecom stocks were down 2.7%. Again, still looking at what's on the right side here. Things like Staples also were up but underperformed. So again, things like the US dollar moving like this, as long as bond prices continue to do what they're doing, we've got a more risk on environment. Doesn't mean that we want to get over the tips of our skis with risk, because we've got a big couple of weeks of earnings ahead of us. So let's take it day by day with some of these earnings reports. But overall, and I was saying in the trading room today, I was being very methodical, and I was able to unwind some risk on the highs of the day. Our semis trade that I had on over the last week, I took this off at 160 today, and that's perfect. I mean, this was a nice breakout too, right? Let this kind of come in a little bit. AMD is what I traded this morning, but I wasn't going to hang on to this trade either, because first of all, one of the things that I noticed with AMD is it was one of the last semiconductors to really partake in the rally. A lot of other semiconductors did really well, so I was a little bit suspect trading this one today, but this was a nice winning trade today too. I unwound the last piece back at my cost basis, but hit several targets in this one. And again, perfectly fine. Tesla, I'm looking for this to get up to 288 before earnings and then unwind it there. And a couple other names that we've been looking at are participating in some aspect. UNP, which has seen a lot of call activity. IDXX was a name, speaking of healthcare. IDEX Labs, very strong move that happened this week. And we'll kind of be prepared for next week and for earnings reports, and be able to kind of take advantage of those. So that is it for this week's recap. And as I mentioned, if you are looking to be a Tribeca Trade Group member, there is a coupon code that you can use for first-time members. That coupon code is TTG 2023, and you can go to tribecatradegroup.com to be a member. Guys, have a great weekend. This was a really nice week of trading, and we look to carry it forward next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.